Welcome to the University of Michigan Dentistry Podcast Series, promoting oral health care worldwide.
Our next step is the determination of the vertical dimension of occlusion. Inasmuch as this is a bit of a subjective determination, we utilize any and all things which will be of aid to us. One of the very important things is the patient, if he is wearing dentures, as Mr. Monahan is here. So the first thing we will do before any other measurements are made is we will determine the vertical dimension of occlusion with the dentures he is now wearing. We will accomplish this with the use of the tongue blade and the millimeter rule. We will place the millimeter rule firmly against the base of the patient's nose, place the tongue blade under the chin, and hold it securely under the chin with one finger. We now then can reproduce this measurement. As you see here, it is about 66 millimeters. This is his vertical dimension of occlusion with his teeth closed. Now we'll check to see how much interocclusal distance or freeway space exists in his old dentures by having him just open. Now open, Mr. Monahan. Just let your lips touch, just your lips. Now you can see he's in a comfortable resting position. This is equivalent to his physiologic rest position. Again, we'll place the millimeter rule, our tongue blade under, and we will read the dimension. As you see here, 68, 69, between 68 and 69. Now bite together. Now you see he's up at 66 again. So with the dentures he is now wearing, he has a freeway or interocclusal distance of approximately 2.5 to 3 millimeters. This is well within reason, and in the new dentures we will not attempt to make much change in this interocclusal distance. So our next step now is to have Mr. Monahan remove his dentures, and we will proceed to establish our dimension of occlusion with the bases that we have fabricated. That's right. Now here we have the master cast. This base has an acrylic base that has been stabilized. As you can see, the foil has been added to the cast, and a light body rubber base has been placed inside the acrylic, giving us a firm, well-fitting, stabilized base plate. Now on this base plate we have established a lower wax rim. As you can see, the lower wax rim has been made to our specifications of being, if extended posteriorly, would hit a point. And here on the cast you see the two lines. These are representing a point on either side, 1 to 2 millimeters below the top of the retromolar pad. Our other requirement for our plane of occlusion is that it be parallel with the mean of the lower residual ridge. And if you'll note, the lower residual ridge, we've tried to parallel this. Now this is a laboratory procedure. So far we have accomplished this totally in the laboratory. We are now going to go to the patient. And the first observation we will make in our patient is the relationship of this plane of occlusion, or tentative plane of occlusion, with the corners of the mouth. We want the plane to be at or below the corners of the mouth. So we'll place this in the mouth, seat it firmly, and just let Mr. Monahan close for a moment. Now just open slowly, right about there. We want the mouth open just part way. And now we will observe the relationship of this wax rim with the corners of the mouth. I think you can see very readily that we are a bit high. We see too much of the wax rim. It is not at the corner of the mouth, but it is at least 2 millimeters above. So we will make the modification on the wax rim at the present time. We will remove this, And we will back to the flame and cut down the height of this wax rim. For this purpose, we'll use the putty knife, a flat, heavy surface that can absorb a lot of heat, and with this we can equally remove any excess wax. And we were attempting to remove a couple of millimeters, yet keep this flat and in the same relative relationship to our retromolar pads. This appears to be approximately correct. We'll go now return to our patient and check it. Okay, it's well seated. Now, Mr. Monahan, just close and slightly open. And you see now, right at that point, with his mouth slightly open, we are right where we wanted to be, at a point where we are at or below the corner of the mouth with our wax occlusion rim. We will now, with this wax occlusion rim, determine our vertical dimension of occlusion using the maxillary base plate and soft wax. We will remove the base plate from the cast, which has been mounted by the face bow, and with one sheet of pink base plate wax, we will soften over our flame and roll it into a roll, which we will attach to that base plate. We now have the maxillary rim in soft wax, and the patient then will close into the soft wax with the hard wax of the lower. Now we can shape this with our fingers and form a tentative occlusion rim. And we will fix that roughly the shape that we want and seal it with the number 7 around the borders. The sealing is important because saliva is a very, very good lubricant. And if some saliva can work in between the base plate and the wax rim will come off and we will have to repeat our whole procedure. So we'll seal this all the way around to prevent any saliva from creeping under, separating our wax from the base plate. Now we can go back to the patient. And if you'll open for me, Mr. Monahan. And we'll place the maxillary rim in and just let him relax and squeeze slowly, just a bit. Now, at that dimension of occlusion, you can see it's obvious he is open. His jaws are too far apart. Now just squeeze a little harder. Just a little harder into the soft wax. That's good, right there. Now we'll see what the measurement is. And if you'll recall, we had a measurement of 66 millimeters before. And you can see here we have 68. So just squeeze again, bite a little harder. That's good. And again, we'll measure. And we are at 66 millimeters. Now open. And usually at this point, both rims will come out together. Now we're going to check very quickly to see if we are at all close in between the retromolar pad and the tuberosity on either side. If these two are touching, we must make some changes before we can go any farther. There's plenty of space between them, so this is an approximation of our vertical dimension of occlusion. We'll separate this and trim off the excess wax. As you can see, it has squeezed out both lingually and buccally, and then we will contour the maxillary rim to give us some idea as to where we're going to set the maxillary teeth for proper lip contour. If I place this back in Mr. Monahan, now you can see that his lip is a little bit too full. It is pushed out by the wax rim, so we'll trim some of this off. Okay, open. And again, we'll go back to our Bunsen burner with our putty knife and remove the excess. We now have removed the excess wax, and we've removed some across the front where we were a little bit on the bulky side, so we'll place this back in the patient's mouth now and double check ourselves. Now, if you'll just close together for me, that's fine. Now that's great. That looks real nice. And now we'll check from the profile and see that we have just about the right amount of lip support for Mr. Monahan. So at the present time, we now have, we hope, our tentative vertical dimension of occlusion. We're going to go back and double check this again. As I said, this is a subjective type of evaluation. We constantly review it and to make sure that we are where we want to be. So again, we'll use our millimeter rule. Now, Mr. Monahan, you have those rims tight together, don't you? All right, fine. And the measurement that I'm reading here each time is 66 millimeters, just what we had predetermined to be our vertical dimension of occlusion. We now can double check this, and we'll show you a different way of determining this, and that is one whereby we use a dot on the most forward portion of the chin and another immediately on the nose or on the cartilage of the nose and the lip junction. Now we'll measure a distance between these two dots. And when we do this, we see that we here have a distance measurement of exactly 57 millimeters. So now we'll ask Mr. Monahan to open. Just let your lips close, just touch, not the wax rims. And again, we'll measure between those dots, and we have a measurement of 60. So you see, we have demonstrated again that we have a 3 millimeter interocclusal distance, or freeway space. So to summarize, we would say that the vertical dimension of occlusion equals the physiologic rest position minus the interocclusal distance, or the freeway space. Our next step now will be to record the centric relationship. We will do this by the use of a soft wax and some grooves on the opposing rim. For this purpose, we'll have this close together, Mr. Monahan, and we'll make a little mark right at the cuspid region on either side of this maxillary rim. Now, the anterior portion will maintain our vertical dimension of occlusion. The posterior portion we will take out of occlusion and substitute a soft wax for the pink wax. So if we'll remove now the maxillary rim, and with a knife we will cut out approximately 2 millimeters from this little notch that I made posteriorly on either side, and we'll place a soft wax in a softened condition in this on either side. Now, when we place this back in the mouth, you will be able to see the only contact is in the front portion. There will be no contact in the back portion. Now bite together, Mr. Monahan. You see this space is wide open. This is where we'll place our soft wax. Now, opposing that soft wax, we'll make some grooves in the lower wax rim. Now, open again. We have the lower. With our knife, we'll make a couple distinct, not deep, only about 1 millimeter deep, but distinct, sharp, V-shaped grooves on either side. Then we'll use a lubricant, and for that purpose we'll use Vaseline to wipe over the lower wax occlusion rim. This will allow easy separation in the mouth. Just a little Vaseline wiped over the occlusion rim and wiped into the grooves allows good separation. We now will remove the maxillary rim, and we'll go back to our Bunsen burner and soften some soft bite wax. For this purpose, there are several waxes that can be used, but we will use an alu wax. And we'll fold it. Remove the excess. And again, soften over the Bunsen and place onto the area where we had removed the pink wax. As you can see, we are using a little excess. On each side. We want this wax to be displaced into the grooves over the wax lower rim, and it will squeeze out on either side. Now the sealing of the soft wax is completed on both sides, and we will return to our patient. The lower rim has been lubricated and will be placed in the mouth. Maxillary rim with the soft wax will be placed in the mouth. And now it's important that the patient close the two rims together in this most retruded position. For this purpose, our patient is well trained in closing in centric relation, but it is important that we hold this lower rim firmly in position, one finger on either side on the first molar region of that acrylic tray, and our thumb under the mandible, not out in front and pushing back, but under the mandible. Allow the patient to guide his mandible. And if you have any difficulty, you could instruct him to pull his tongue to the back of the roof of his mouth and then squeeze together. Now slowly just squeeze together there, Mr. Monahan, into the soft wax. Bite right into it. Squeeze it. Now squeeze hard. A little harder. You see it starting to flow. A little harder. And you're watching the anterior. And as he approaches contact, right there you will stop. Now the anterior rims are just in the slight contact that we want. That is our guide for maintaining our vertical dimension. Now, as you can see on either side, the excess soft wax is squeezed out. Now just open for me. That's right. And we'll remove the two rims and we'll separate them. And you can see the indentations of the grooves that we had made in our lower rim. We'll now, with this sharp knife again, we will cut off any excess on the buckle and on the lingual. This, actually, if you allow this to remain, it does guide the patient into a certain position. We don't want to do that. We want to record his position as he comes into it naturally. So we'll get rid of any excess that's on either the lingual or the buccal. Then we'll go back in the mouth again and ensure that he is capable of duplicating this same position. And again, open. And now once more. And again, Mr. Monahan, just close, incentric, just close with your jaw relaxed, close into tight contact. Now, I think you can see how nicely the wax fits into the grooves. It's exactly flush, in other words, he is contacting in exactly the same position as he did before. Over this way, Mr. Monahan, and you can see the same situation on this side. This now completes our registration of centric relation. We now will go to our articulator and mount the lower cast to the articulator and proceed to our next step. Our next step will be to prepare the lower cast for mounting to the articulator. You'll note we will check the thickness of the base. If this exceeds a ½ inch, we'll put it on the model trimmer and remove some. The reason being that this cast must be prepared so that it will fit into the flask later on, also prepared so it'll fit in accurately and with adequate space into our articulator. We now will groove the base of the cast so to give us some definite mounting indexes. We'll prepare one on either of the 3 corners. We now have 3 indices, which will lute our cast to the mounting of the articulator with accurate relationship. We are now prepared to place the wax rims back on the cast. We'll place the lower rim on the lower cast and the upper rim onto the cast already mounted by use of the face bowl. Ensure the fact these bases are accurately seated. Otherwise, an error will result. Now place the wax rims together and check carefully this relationship of the heels. Both the heels of the base plates and the heels of the cast must have space between them so that wax and wax alone is recording our relationship. If the heels of the cast are touching, now is the time to reduce those until we do have an adequate space between them. As we can see here, the casts are not touching and the base plates are not touching. So in this position, we will mount the lower cast to the upper. We will now lute the 2 casts, or the 2 bases together by luting the wax together. And with the number 7 heated over the Bunsen, we will seal the wax on both sides. Now our next step is to ensure that our articulator is in the correct condition for mounting. This means that the lateral posts of the articulator are both set at 0, and that you'll note that the pin, the incisal pin, is flush with the top of the upper member. Now we will use the mounting stand, place the articulator on the mounting stand, and we now can open the lower member, and we're ready to mount the, be sure your upper is correctly seated and tight, and everything is secure. We will now mix some plaster. I have some water in the bowl, and we'll add some plaster to it. Not a great deal of plaster is necessary for this procedure at this time. We're only going to mount it preparatory to checking to make sure our relationship is correct. We'll use a rather soft mix of plaster, and we'll place some plaster on the mounting ring and some plaster on the base of the cast. All right, that probably is enough for there. Now we'll place some plaster on our mounting rings just to lock those accurately into place. A little more up here to ensure that we're going to contact, and we will close the articulator. Any excess that should happen to come off, as you can see in the front, we will remove. Now we will allow the articulator to stand in that position until the plaster has set. The plaster has now set, so we can remove the articulator from its mounting stand, and we're ready to separate the two rims from each other. Now, if we will use a knife, and we'll cut through the area where we sealed the two rims together on both sides, and this is important. We don't want to attempt to force these apart. We want to cut them apart. So the opening of the articulator and of the rims will be not placing unfavorable leverages on our mounting. We now can see that our lower rim came apart rather nicely. If we do have excess wax on there, we will remove it. On both sides, we'll sharpen our grooves, make sure that they are very sharp, definite grooves again. And when we go to the patient, we will replace all the soft wax on the upper rim with new wax and record from the patient a new wax relationship. We're now going to verify the centric relation. As you can see, I have added extra new soft wax to the maxillary rim. We will now soften this uniformly using the alcohol torch, and we will flame this soft wax both sides equally. You can see it flows at a very low temperature. And we will place now the maxillary rim in the patient and the mandibular rim, which has been prepared by resoftening, regrooving the lower rim. Now just let us close, and you note the position of my fingers, just in centric relation, squeeze into the soft wax. A little bit more, and a little bit more, and right there. Now open, Mr. Monahan. And again, the two rims stick together. We now have excess, and we will separate. Now we'll go back to the laboratory bench and cut off the excess. Both buccal and lingual. Because this wax is soft, it is wise perhaps to double check by returning to the patient once again, just making sure that in the cutting of the wax we didn't pull it in any dimension. Now we'll place these back in our patient and check to make sure that we are exactly in the same position. And again, Mr. Monahan, just squeeze. Now, as we can see, the grooves are completely filled. This side is completely together, exactly as it was before. We'll check the other side. Same situation. So we did not alter our soft wax. Now, open, Mr. Monahan. All right. We will now go back to our articulator. We will now place the two rims on the articulator, and you'll note we have made a change in the articulator, that we have loosened the condyles. These screws have been loosened, allowing full movement of the condyles on each side. We now then will close the articulator, and with this loose, it can seek its own positioning until the two wax rims are seated, as you see now. The two wax rims are completely seated into the keys, and now we are going to check as to our condylar balls being forward and resting to our anterior stops. This is important that both sides are resting forward. In other words, we have recorded the same relationship as we had previously recorded. So we have verified our centric relation. Our next step then is to add more soft wax and return to the patient for the registration of a protrusive position so that we may set our condylar inclinations. We'll add just a little more wax each side, cut off the excess, add a little more on this side, and again we'll cut off the excess and soften this with our alcohol torch. At this point, it isn't extremely important that patient close all the way. But what is important is that he protrude his mandible so that we can get a registration of the two positions, one in the forward protruded position and the other in the centric position. All right, we'll place maxillary in and the mandibular rim. And now, Mr. Monahan, just slowly close, but shove your jaw slowly forward, right about there. Now close a little more, a little more. Okay, stop right there. Now note that we did not allow him to come completely close to the correct occlusal vertical dimension. We're keeping him a bit open. And now open. And again, we go back to the articulator and adjust the condylar mechanism. Now we can separate. Place the maxillary, well seated, mandibular, completely seated, and now with our mechanism wide open and these loose so that they can go in any direction, we will now attempt to seat the two wax rims together. Now at that position, the anterior is apart, so we must move the condylar mechanism until we get a uniform seating. When we go to the other side, note the incisal pin is not touching, because if that touches, then it will disrupt the complete seating. And when I move right in this position, I get maximum seating on that side. I go back, move a little bit more, and there's maximum seating there. Now we will tighten our condylar mechanisms, and you see we read 10 degrees on his right side and about 24 on his left side. So we'll tighten those. Note also that the condylar ball is separated from its anterior stop by at least 1/4 inch or more on either side. This is important. If this ball is forward, then we get a faulty registration. We now then are prepared to select our teeth.
You've been listening to a presentation from the University of Michigan School of Dentistry, which is dedicated to supporting open learning and open educational resources. This recording is licensed under the Creative Commons. It may be reused and redistributed for nonprofit use. Please attribute materials to the University of Michigan School of Dentistry and redistribute under this same license. For more information on how this and other University of Michigan School of Dentistry recordings may be used, visit www.dent.umich.edu/license.